Thank you very much. I give greetings to the mana whenua of this place, Ngāti Whātua e ngā hāpū katoa o Tamaki Makaurau. Me ngā hau e whā, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi o te mutu. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. The biggest economic opportunity in a generation is heading our way. The next economic wave of innovation is the smart green economic revolution. In renewable energy, sustainable food, sustainable transport, green chemistry, cradle-to-cradle design, low-carbon buildings, and so much more. The green economic revolution represents an opportunity to create thousands of green-collar jobs in New Zealand. It is an opportunity to build from the platform of our clean green reputation in order to sell high-value food to a world hungry for safe, natural food and willing to pay a premium for it. It is an opportunity to leverage our experience in clean energy generation to sell clean energy technology to the world, a world that's desperate for ways to cut carbon emissions. It is an opportunity to harness our smartest minds and our brightest entrepreneurs to embrace a $1.3 trillion market in green tech and clean tech globally. A market that is not only the next big thing, but is also part of the solution that will actually ensure the survival of our civilization. The Green Party says, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our planet, and for the sake of our economy, let's ride that green economic wave. And I'm here to tell you how we can do it. Today I'm going to set out 5 things that we can do to create a clean green economy that works for everyone. Our first task is to value the things in our economy and society that are of real value, not just GDP value. Every day, the old economists and the old parties tell us that maximising GDP is the only way to judge our success. They tell us that a business that increases greenhouse emissions is just as valuable as a business that decreases greenhouse emissions, so long as they both make a profit. They tell us that a corporate raider is just as valuable as a company that produces healthy food. They tell us that the pollution in the Waikato River is a boon for GDP because you make money putting the pollution into the river, and then Aucklanders have to spend money to get the pollution out of it again so they can drink it. The Green Movement has been saying for decades that the true test of a society's success is not the rise and fall of GDP. The true test of a society's success is the well-being of our land, our water, and our people. And now, others are starting to say this too. French President Nicolas Sarkozy established a commission headed by leading economist Joseph Stiglitz, which highlighted the shortcomings of GDP and put the case for an alternative. Stiglitz said, "What we measure affects what we do. If we have the wrong metrics, we strive for the wrong things." And even dry as a bone New Zealand Treasury has felt the water of life coming in under the door and admitted that a singular focus on GDP growth has concealed losses in quality of life. Measuring the right things is the first step to catching the green economic wave. The second job, if we want to catch the global green economic wave, is to build on the success of our existing publicly owned energy companies. They are the launching platform for the smart green New Zealand economy. These companies are the nucleus of the growing clean energy sector. All of them have some renewable generation experience. Even Solid Energy has a biofuel operation. These companies have the size and mass, critical mass, to compete internationally. These energy companies have the kind of intellectual property and hands-on experience that is desperately sought after in a world that is hungry for clean energy. These publicly owned energy companies are worth more today than they were yesterday, and they will be worth much more tomorrow. And that's why selling them is a huge mistake. These energy companies can form the centre of a clean energy sector in New Zealand, a sector with truly massive export potential. They have already started to look at export opportunities. They're building geothermal generation in California, for example. But the sky is the limit. The clean energy sector is booming internationally. The solar, wind and biofuels market is worth $190 billion this year and is projected to grow to $350 billion a year in the next decade. New Zealand can get a piece of that action by being focused and strategic and building on our strengths. But that is just the beginning. We can also tap into the creative ideas in the private sector beyond the public energy companies. I believe in our New Zealand entrepreneurial spirit, the number 8Y mentality, if you like. I believe that we have the imagination and the drive to patent new ideas and new technologies, and that will be part of the global green revolution. We need to back ourselves. Every year at the Sustainable Business Awards, there are dozens of new startups bubbling with great green ideas. An Investment New Zealand report last year identified 250 companies and organisations already involved in researching, developing and commercialising clean technology in New Zealand. These clean tech entrepreneurs need a partner with expertise and capital in order to do the research, development, testing and marketing to launch into the world. And that's where the publicly owned energy companies come in. The public energy companies can step up to form alliances with clean tech private partners. They can form relationships with green tech bright sparks who have new ideas but who need a strong partner. These supercharged public energy companies can form the hub of a network of clean technology joint ventures. Some of them have already started. For example, Meridian owns 93% of WhisperTech, but we can do much, much more. These supercharged energy companies can launch our green entrepreneurs into the world, together building a safer future for our children. New Zealand would be renowned and will be renowned for its creative solutions to global challenges. And instead of us paying to use other people's ideas, why don't we invent our own and they can buy ours for a change? However, a small country like New Zealand will always face the risk that successful companies will be bought by overseas owners and have their intellectual property, headquarters and research moved offshore. We get left with the branch office that sends the profits offshore and has no focus on exporting from New Zealand. It is an all too familiar story, happened to Contact Energy. But it's a story we can do something about. We can keep it Kiwi. We can keep the energy companies in public ownership so they stay here and form the launching platform for a clean energy export sector. Keep the energy companies in public ownership so they stay in New Zealand, but let them partner with private sector clean tech entrepreneurs. Those partnerships then have an anchor in New Zealand so we get the ongoing benefits of jobs and research and we don't lose critical mass overseas. Now that's what I call a mixed economy. Now John Key's so-called mixed ownership model actually loses the public element of the mix and ultimately leads to the loss of these companies to overseas owners as the anchor of public ownership diminishes and we miss the opportunity to catch the green economic wave. That is not an economic strategy, that is a white flag. That is not a vision for New Zealand, that is a plane ticket for our best and our brightest. Why does this government always want to be a second-rate follower instead of a first-rate leader? Now, National says the energy companies need access to capital. Okay, fair enough. But you don't need to privatise them to do that. There is an alternative way to get access to the capital, which is for the publicly owned energy companies to issue green energy bonds directly to the people of New Zealand. It is a win-win, because after the debacle of the finance companies' collapse, many New Zealanders are actually looking for a safe place to invest their money and their retirement nest egg. Green energy bonds would provide such a safe place, while giving the public energy companies access to the capital so that they can take advantage of the green energy opportunities. And it keeps the companies in public ownership and in New Zealand. Supercharged public energy companies partnered with bright green Kiwi entrepreneurs, funded by Kiwi mums and dads, with safe green energy bonds, exporting clean technology to the world. Now that is a vision for a bright future for our country. And I say to the government, we tried the old recipe of privatisation and foreign takeover in the 1980s and 1990s, and it did not work. You only have to look at the banking industry to see what foreign ownership does to our economy. Foreign banks own about 95% of banking assets in our country. Over the last 2 years, the big four Aussie banks have moved through about $3.5 billion in dividends overseas. Most of that $3.5 billion has gone out of our country. We need to fix our finance sector to achieve greater levels of Kiwi ownership and to make capital available for sustainable investment. And this is the third part of the Green Economic Plan. The Green Party is serious about fixing our banking system so that we are no longer mortgage slaves to the Aussie banks. That's why I am announcing today that the Green Party will, over time, move the government's banking contract to Kiwibank. Our government's banking should be done by our New Zealand bank. Moving the government's accounts to Kiwibank will take a careful transition over a number of years so that Kiwibank's ready to handle it. In the short term, we would tender the government's master banking contract to seek to break up the cosy monopoly that Westpac currently has. The pressure the Green Party has been applying over this contract has led the government to now say that they will open the master banking contract for tender. So that is a victory for the Greens. But our work is not complete. When tendering the contract, the Green Party would include a national interest test. The Aussie banks will need to demonstrate that they contribute to local jobs and the local economy if they want to get our business. The government's banking should go to banks that offer the government the best value, not the best rock concert tickets. By including a national interest test in the tender, we would anticipate that Kiwibank and other New Zealand banks could get at least some of the government contract in the short term. In the medium term, we would continue to work with Kiwibank to increase its capability so that it can undertake all of the government's banking as soon as possible. There are other steps we can take to increase the role that Kiwibank plays in making our banking system more competitive. At the moment, Kiwibank represents only 3% of banking assets. A bigger, stronger Kiwibank can help New Zealanders save money on their mortgage repayments through breaking up the Australian bank's anti-competitive cartel. We would allow Kiwibank to reinvest more of its profits back into its own business so that it can grow its capital base and compete with the big Aussie banks. Kiwibank is one part of the capital market changes we need, but only one part. We also need to address the drivers of debt. In New Zealand, we've become used to borrowing everything we need. We've become used to borrowing everything we need, but that can't go on, not with a gross external debt of $250 billion. Much of this borrowing was to fund speculation in urban and rural land over the last decade. We have to look at ways to reduce our borrowing for real estate. One way to reduce borrowing is to introduce rules so that only New Zealand citizens and permanent residents can buy New Zealand land. Keeping our land in New Zealand hands means there is less pressure on rural and urban land prices from overseas buyers. This is particularly important with overseas governments looking to buy assets in New Zealand right now. Kiwi farmers and families hoping to buy their first farm or their first home won't have to compete with international buyers, and hence they won't have to borrow as much to get a foot in the door. This frees up capital for more productive uses. It also means that the profits from agriculture, which will only increase in time as safe food becomes more and more valuable, those profits stay local and are not lost to the international economy. This also has additional benefits for the currency. If New Zealand land and public assets are not available to overseas investors, we will see less upward pressure on the New Zealand dollar. The dollar is currently being driven up on news that the Chinese government's investment corporation is looking at buying billions of dollars of New Zealand assets. A lower dollar will help our tradable sector, both exporters and those who compete with imports. But wait, there's more. Our proposal for a capital gains tax, excluding the family home, will redirect savings and investment away from unproductive housing speculation into more productive investments. A capital gains tax will make houses more affordable for young buyers who are currently priced out of the market, and over time it will raise about $4.5 billion for the government. It sends a signal to investors to place their capital somewhere other than housing speculation. We need our capital for productive green investment, and these measures will help make that change. Sorting out the capital markets is vital to the New Zealand economy, and it's vital to the green transition. The Aussie banks have had a free rein to control capital, and they've made a mess of it, borrowing for speculation in land and housing to maximise their profits at the expense of New Zealand. It's time to mobilise capital markets to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, by investing in the smart green economy. The fourth thing we can do to catch the green economic wave is to restore and protect our clean, green and safe brand by taking action to clean up our natural environment. By accident or design, we are known globally as clean, green and safe. In a world worried about carbon emissions, polluted water and contaminated food, having a reputation for being clean, green and safe is a huge advantage. In a world where retailers from Tesco to Walmart are reducing their emissions and their waste, being seen as green is a competitive advantage. Being sustainable is even necessary now to get even on the shelves of some of the major overseas retailers, as the New Zealand hockey industry found when it was thrown out of a UK supermarket because of their disgraceful bottom trawling practices. But we are already losing this valuable green reputation, as demonstrated recently when John Key was interviewed on the BBC and they asked him about polluted rivers, much to his surprise. The world will tolerate us being less than 100% pure, but only if we acknowledge the fact and only if we take steps to clean it up. Sadly, the current government is failing on both of these tests, and they are recklessly endangering an $18 billion brand. That's what it's been valued at. This is big money. Our single biggest exporter in New Zealand in the last decade was tourism. This is an industry entirely built on clean and green branding. Visitors don't come here to get infections from one of our rivers, as fun as that is, as I can testify myself. They come here because we show them stock footage of clean rivers. If we continue to destroy our environment, we will destroy our single biggest export industry. Tourism has its own challenges, especially from oil prices and carbon emissions, but let's not add to its problems by crapping on the brand. The second biggest export over the last decade was dairy, and in the last year it has become our top export because of sales to China. Now let me tell you why the Chinese made dairy our single biggest exporter. It's not the free trade agreement. And it's not because they're looking for the cheapest commodities, dairy commodities, on the planet. It's because Chinese families think New Zealand dairy products are safe and natural. Chinese families are scared because of the contaminated food disasters there that their dairy food from China is contaminated and it's dangerous for their kids. The dairy industry is as dependent on the clean, green and safe branding as the tourism industry is. Our clean, green and safe branding is a better guarantee of market access than a trade deal will ever be. There's nothing like consumers actually wanting your products. We've been lucky so far with the brand, but our luck won't last. Hoki won't be the last New Zealand product to be banned for being unsustainable. If the dairy industry is left to its own devices, with National Labor just too scared to regulate them, then we will end up with toxic rivers of slime up and down the country, and the Chinese will say, hey, we've got our own toxic rivers of slime, why should we buy food from your country? We need to regulate those dirty dairy corporations that are making a quick buck pouring crap into our rivers. We can protect the reputation of New Zealand Inc. and we can protect the reputation of the good dairy farmers. Okay, if we're going to have a prosperous New Zealand economy which rides the smart green economic wave, then the fifth thing we need is a functional market. We actually need a proper functional market that has real prices that give companies clear directions about where to invest. Currently, we don't have proper price signals on carbon emissions and water use, and it sends all the wrong messages to New Zealand companies about investing in polluting technologies versus investing in clean technologies. The current emissions trading scheme means that the dairy sector won't face the full price of its emissions until 2084. 2084 is when they face the full price of their emissions under the current ETS. So Fonterra, naturally, spends less on research that would cut greenhouse emissions, and it spends more on lobbying central government to make sure that the taxpayer-funded subsidies continue. Fonterra's new milk plant at Darfield will be coal-fuelled because they figure coal won't face the true cost of its harm to the rest of the economy and society for years. So the taxpayer inherits the financial cost of our emissions. $2 billion has been budgeted in the budget, has been put in the budget over 2 years to subsidise pollution, and our children inherit the real cost: a destabilised climate and rising sea levels. The government is distorting the market to subsidise greenhouse pollution. Think about that. The National Party government is distorting the market to subsidise greenhouse pollution. It is an intergenerational crime against humanity, and it's anti-market. We need a realistic price on carbon to curb this market distortion. That is where Australia is heading, and our friend Senator Bob Brown, the leader of the Australian Green Party, will tell us more about that when he speaks to our conference on Monday. Then there's water. The dairy corporations don't invest in the efficient use of irrigation water because they get it for free. So these corporate vandals pump it, spray it with gay abandon in the rain on windy days and on days when the soil is already soaked because there is no economic cost to wasting it. And that means our rivers and aquifers are drained more and there is more leaching of pollution. We all pay the cost in degraded rivers and aquifers while the dairy corporations make the profits. The latest OECD country report on New Zealand actually calls for a price on water for irrigators. Good on the OECD. speaking of our friends at the OECD, whom we don't agree with about it and everything, one of the most interesting pieces of research last year was a study showing that eco-taxes actually increase innovation. More innovation, research and development because of eco-taxes, and that makes sense. If you want a knowledge-intensive economy, you need to create the incentives to create the knowledge. Irrigators don't invest in the technology that would tell them how much moisture is in the soil and hence how much more water it needs, because they don't pay for the water and they don't pay for the pollution. A price would create an incentive to adopt new technologies. Directing our research and development budget towards green solutions would help too. The recent OECD country report on New Zealand said we should look to become the leading exporter of technologies that mitigate greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. But we need the market signals to drive the innovation. It is one of the realities of the 21st century that Greens argue for market prices, while the polluters and the National Party argue to keep market-distorting subsidies in place. Today I've outlined 5 ways that New Zealand can have a prosperous future by riding the green wave of innovation that is circling the globe. We can learn to value what really matters and not be stuck with GDP. We can have supercharged public energy companies partnered with clean tech entrepreneurs, funded by Kiwi mums and dads, exporting clean technology to the world. We can make the capital markets part of the solution instead of part of the problem. We can protect our valuable clean green brand by cleaning and greening our country. And we can make markets reflect true costs, true environmental costs and true environmental benefits. We can have a clean green economy that works for everyone. But it will only happen if the Greens are in Parliament in force. We need at least 10% of the party vote this November. And we need to retain... and we need to retain MMP as the fairest electoral system. It is our collective destiny to live at a time of extraordinary opportunity and extraordinary danger. There is a giant wave headed in our direction, and it's fueled by a century of fossil fuel economics. It's time to get our heads up. It's time to look forward and not backwards. It's time to start paddling for all that we're worth so that we catch the wave of opportunity rather than being swamped by it. Our children's very lives depend on it.